region, and so we do have updates on that. I also do have the parish-by-parish and county-by-county breakdowns of what to expect in terms of overall impacts, so we'll go through that in great detail as well, and those will also be posted on social media just as soon as we wrap up our briefing here this morning. As always, this is a live interactive briefing, so if you have any questions as we go through our briefing, feel free to post them in our comment section, and we'll answer them just as soon as we get through the monologue here, me talking about everything that's going on. So again, Tropical Storm Francine, still a 65-mile-per-hour tropical storm. It is expected to continue to strengthen gradually through the day today, and maximum sustained winds are expected to be around 90 miles per hour at landfall sometime tomorrow afternoon. As a result of that eastward shift that we just talked about, we have now discontinued tropical storm warnings for pretty much all of southeast Texas, with the exception of lower Jefferson County, where we could still see tropical storm force winds near the coastline. And we've also discontinued tropical storm warnings for Beauregard Parish. So if you're in any of those areas, you are no longer expected to see sustained tropical storm force winds with this system. So that's certainly some good news for parts of southeast Texas and Beauregard Parish. But we are still looking at tropical storm force winds and hurricane force winds across other parts of southwest and south central Louisiana as this storm approaches and makes landfall tomorrow. This is the look at the visible satellite imagery this morning of Francine, and I'll put this full screen for you so you can take a little bit closer look at it. You can see it is it's a fairly well-defined tropical system at this point for a mid-range tropical storm. Pressure has been falling in the storm here this morning, according to the National Hurricane Center and the Hurricane Hunter aircraft that were out investigating the system. And the storm does appear to be getting better organized. You can see it does have some fairly good rain bands here. Come back to me here, and I'll show you what I'm talking about here. These rain bands wrapping into the storm this way here. And then we do have this area here in the middle. This is called a central dense overcast. That's an area of kind of flattened out, very dense cloud cover. And that's an indication of a storm that is gradually intensifying as well. It is still ingesting in a little bit of dry air out of Mexico along the southern side here. You can see there's not a whole lot in the way of precipitation really on the southern side of the storm until you get just to the south of the eye wall there. But other than that, conditions do remain generally favorable for additional intensification of the storm as we go through the day today and into the night tonight. We've been talking about this wind shear across the northern Gulf Coast. That is also still in place. So as the storm approaches the Gulf Coast, the expectation is that we may see it kind of decapitated. The top part of the storm may be displaced from the low-level center. That would be good news in terms of intensification, because that would essentially stop intensification and perhaps start a little bit of a weakening trend. The question is, does that happen before it actually makes landfall? And that's still kind of up for debate at the moment. This is the 10 a.m. advisory from the National Hurricane Center. And another thing to point out with regards to this new advisory is that we are now looking at a north-northeastward motion of the storm. So it has made that turn that we were anticipating would happen overnight and early this morning. So we're now looking at a north-northeastward motion, and we expect that motion to continue all the way up until landfall sometime tomorrow afternoon into tomorrow evening. The current motion is about 8 miles per hour. I think that's probably going to gradually increase somewhat. We're looking at a forward speed at landfall, probably somewhere in the range of about 15 miles per hour or thereabouts. There is very little, if essentially no risk of this storm actually stalling out for any significant period of time. It's actually going to be increasing its forward speed as it's making landfall. So that's certainly some good news. The less we have to deal with it, the better off we're going to be. But all in all, that is, it's going to be a fairly steadily moving storm all the way through landfall and as it gradually moves inland. Again, we are expecting the maximum winds at landfall to be a little bit lower, 90 miles per hour at landfall. This is down from 100 miles per hour. That makes it a strong Category 1 at landfall instead of a Category 2 that we were previously forecasting. This is a look at the latest hurricane and tropical storm watches and warnings now. And again, the tropical storm warnings have been discontinued for all of southeast Texas, with the exception of lower Jefferson County, where we could still see some tropical storm conditions right along the immediate coastline, as well as over Sabine Lake. The tropical storm warnings remain in effect for Calcasieu, Jeff Davis, Allen, Acadia, Evangeline, St. Landry, Avoyelles parishes, as well as lower Jefferson County, as we just mentioned. And we do still have hurricane warnings in effect for Cameron, Vermilion, Lafayette, Iberia, St. Martin, and St. Mary parishes. These are the areas that are expected to see hurricane force winds, and then the areas that are under tropical storm warnings will still have the potential to see tropical storm force winds, or at least wind gusts, with this system as it approaches and makes landfall. This is a look at kind of an overall view of the expected wind threat with this system. You can see the areas highlighted in the red. That is low-end tropical storm force wind threats. And then the area highlighted in purple right along coastal portions of Vermilion Parish are looking at the potential for some gusts greater than 110. Even with a storm system that has sustained winds of 90 miles per hour, you can still get stronger wind gusts within that. And that's why that area is highlighted for higher possible wind gusts right along the immediate coastline there. You can see a large part of the rest of southwest and south central Louisiana away from the immediate coastline, expected to see strong tropical storm force winds. That's the areas highlighted in orange. And those hurricane force winds are expected to move inland along and east of that center of circulation, kind of in that eastern eye wall. So the risk will exist for hurricane force winds into the Baton Rouge area, and the surrounding communities around that. That's kind of where the strongest wind, based on the current forecast track, that's where the strongest wind field is going to be. This is a look at the latest tropical storm force wind speed probabilities. You can see we're looking at a near 100% chance of seeing tropical storm force winds now across coastal portions of Cameron, Vermilion, Iberia, St. Martin, and St. Mary parishes. A 40 to 80% chance of seeing tropical storm force winds across the remainder of southwest Louisiana and south central Louisiana away from the immediate coastline, and then a 20 to 40% chance of seeing tropical storm force winds across southern portions of Jefferson and Orange counties. Even though Orange County is actually not under a tropical storm warning anymore, we can still see some gusts, possibly to tropical storm force across southern parts of the county, and then 20 to 40% chance of seeing tropical storm force winds across central Louisiana. Those areas are not under tropical storm warnings at this point because it's a relatively overall low probability of seeing tropical storm force winds that far north. This is the probability of seeing hurricane force winds. There's roughly about a 30 to 50% chance of seeing hurricane force winds across coastal portions of Cameron, Vermilion, Iberia, St. Martin, and St. Mary parishes right now, and a 5 to 10% chance of seeing hurricane force winds in and around the Lafayette area. The remainder of the region is looking at a less than 5% chance of hurricane force winds. So very unlikely to see hurricane force conditions anywhere else across southeast Texas or southwest Louisiana with this system at this time. As far as the overall time of arrival, this hasn't changed a whole heck of a lot. We're still looking at tropical storm force winds beginning Wednesday morning between about 6 and 10 a.m. Landfall has been pushed back a little bit. We're looking at a landfall now probably between about 5 and 8 p.m. Wednesday evening, but we're still going to be looking at the onset of those tropical storm force winds, again, between about 6 and 10 a.m. tomorrow morning. And then conditions will gradually deteriorate through the day with those hurricane force winds coming ashore during the late afternoon and early evening on Wednesday. Taking a look at the steering patterns across the Gulf of Mexico, we're still looking at generally the storm being steered largely by, come on, work for me. Okay. By this area of high pressure over the eastern Gulf of Mexico, we have this clockwise circulation around that high pressure area. That's what's been steering it to the north. And now that it's kind of getting north of kind of the equator of the high pressure here, we're starting to see this curve off to the northeast. We also still have this this trough of low pressure, this kind of stationary frontal boundary right near the coast. The storm is going to gradually track into that, and that's why it's going to increase in forward speed as it moves into this. Those winds moving across it are going to kind of increase its forward speed. But what's also going to happen is we're going to be looking at wind shear increasing. So if we've got a storm that's the winds are blowing counterclockwise like this around it, and then you've got winds blowing from west to east across it, you're essentially going to decapitate it in the mid-levels of the atmosphere. If you think about a storm kind of as a stacked entity, and then the winds blow across it and essentially kind of cut it in half. So what's going to happen is the top portion of the circulation is going to kind of move away from the lower portion as that wind shear kind of tears it apart near landfall. So we expect that that'll at least stop strengthening, if not begin a reduction in strength as the storm approaches and actually makes landfall. So that's actually a good thing when it comes to the storm actually making landfall, because a storm that is intensifying all the way up through landfall has that added momentum and the impacts tend to be a little bit stronger. If a storm is kind of in a weakening phase, the impacts can actually be less than are anticipated, because it's kind of got the opposite, the lower momentum, with the impacts beginning to fall off. So that's certainly some good news, regardless of where the storm winds up making landfall. The impacts of a steadily weakening storm would be less than they might otherwise be. At least for now, though, conditions are still favorable. We're still looking at very warm sea surface temperatures out over the Gulf of Mexico in the mid to upper 80s. So that is certainly favorable. This graphic here depicts that wind shear I mentioned over the northern Gulf of Mexico. It's in a very light wind shear environment right now, as denoted by the blues and greens there, but it's going to be moving into a much higher shear environment as it approaches the Gulf Coast, as denoted by the reds and the white colors there, right along the Texas-Louisiana coastline. So it is going to be moving into a more hostile environment in about 24 hours or thereabouts. So that's about the time frame it's going to have to intensify. It's got about 24 more hours or so to intensify before it's going to start encountering that much higher wind shear. And at that point, intensification should largely stop, if not seeing a little bit in the way of a weakening trend. We're going to start talking about impacts now across the region. I'm going to start broadly, and then we'll get more specific. Generally speaking, we are still looking at a low-end risk of flash flooding today. We are seeing some rainfall approaching the coastline here this morning, especially across parts of lower Acadiana. So we are looking at a 15% chance of flash flooding this afternoon into this evening across parts of Vermilion, Southern Lafayette, Iberia, St. Martin, St. Mary parishes, and essentially along and south of I-10 across parts of southeast Louisiana, as these outer bands begin to start working their way into the region. Sorry about that. As we head into tomorrow, we're going to be looking at even higher overall risk. Now, notice that the flash flood risk has shifted somewhat to the east. This highest flood risk, looking at a 40% chance or more, essentially kind of cuts between Jeff Davis and Acadia Parish right now, kind of bisects Evangeline Parish, and points further east from there. West of there, again, this is where the center of circulation is expected to make landfall. West of there, there's going to be a very large, or a very tight, I should say, precipitation gradient between areas that potentially receive a lot of rainfall and those who aren't going to see much at all, because we tend to see a pretty sharp drop off in precipitation on the west side of the storm. And the fact that this storm is going to be kind of getting decapitated at the time it's making landfall, again, we're going to be looking at this very strong wind shear. So what's going to happen is a lot of the precipitation is probably going to get pushed off to the east side. So there may not be a whole lot, if any, real heavy precipitation on the west side of the storm, which most of the area that we forecast for is going to be on the west side of that storm. So that's why we have this fairly sharp delineation in drop off in precipitation west of that center of circulation. Still looking at very high potential for flash flooding, though, from Lafayette down towards New Iberia, all of Vermilion Parish, St. Martin, St. Mary, and then pretty much all of southeast Louisiana, looking at pretty high probabilities of flash flooding, with being well to the east of that center of circulation, and that precipitation being pushed off to the east will help enhance that flash flood risk. We do still have flood watches in effect across all of the Louisiana parishes that we cover, and this does extend into southeast Louisiana as well. It's just not shown here on this graphic. There are no flood watches in effect for southeast Texas, as it looks like there's not going to be a whole lot of rainfall to speak of that far west. We may see some rain across parts of lower Jefferson County, but the majority of southeast Texas is not going to see even really a whole lot in the way of rainfall, maybe a half an inch up to an inch or thereabouts. That's going to be about it. This is a broad view of our forecast rainfall totals. You can see that that large swath of 6 to 8 inches in the orange area along and east of the center of circulation. Even higher totals right near the coastline, the bright orange there, 8 to 12 inches officially forecast. And then you can see on the east side of the storm, on the right side of the storm into southeast Louisiana, there's a very large swath of very high rainfall totals. But on the west side, or the left side across southwest Louisiana back towards Lake Charles, the rainfall totals are significantly less in a pretty tight gradient. So we're looking at much lower rainfall totals on the west side of the storm. That should serve to diminish the overall flash flood threat, say back towards Lake Charles and certainly across southeast Texas. The biggest threat is going to be south central Louisiana, essentially from Lafayette, Vermilion Parish eastward as it pertains to the overall flash flood threat. We do still have storm surge warnings in effect for coastal portions of southeast Texas and southwest Louisiana. We are still looking at the potential for some significant storm surge. We'll talk about that here right now. Actually, we're looking at anywhere between 5 to 10 feet of surge essentially from Rockefeller Wildlife Refuge east to Port Fourchon, 3 to 5 feet of surge from Rockefeller west to Sabine Pass, and 2 to 4 feet of surge from Sabine Pass to High Island. The southeast Texas surge values and west of Rockefeller have come down from where they were previously, as we're expecting less overall impacts from surge with a storm with that eastward track shift here early this morning. This is another look at the potential for storm surge threat. We're still looking at potential for up to 9 feet of storm surge across coastal parts of Vermilion Parish and then in and around the Vermilion Lake. I said Vermilion Lake. That's an inside joke we have here at our office. Vermilion Bay. The Hurricane Center once called it a lake, and so now we jokingly call it a lake, and I have to try to not do that in public. Anyway, going around Vermilion Bay, we're looking at, for St. Martin, St. Mary, Iberia parishes, looking at significant storm surge flooding potential right along the immediate coastline. For St. Mary, that's going to be outside of the levee protection areas that you're going to see that significant inundation from storm surge flooding. As far as surge in and around Vermilion Bay goes, this is kind of a worst case scenario from storm direction. The good news is we're not dealing with, a Cat 3, Cat 4 type of situation, but the wind direction is going to pile a lot of water into Vermilion Bay. So we are going to be looking at some significant surge flooding around the entire Bay area, outside of areas that are protected by levee systems. There is still a tornado risk. This again kind of shifted a little bit further to the east with the that eastward shift in track. Our highest overall risk is going to be essentially from Lafayette to New Iberia to Morgan City and parts of southeast Louisiana. The marginal risk, the low end possibility of a tornado on the west side of the storm does extend as far west as Lake Charles and as far north as Alexandria. Points west of there are not expected to see any real risk of tornadoes, as you're going to be too far away from the center of circulation in any capacity to really have to worry about that. So essentially, tornado possibilities, Lake Charles to Alexandria and points eastward, with the highest overall risk essentially from Lafayette eastward across southeast Louisiana. And that is going to begin as early as late tonight and continue through the day Wednesday, coming to an end by sometime either late Wednesday night or early Thursday morning. So that's what we have here this afternoon, or this morning, I should say, from the National Weather Service. We are going to do our parish by parish and county by county breakdowns next here. If you're interested in that, stick around. If you're not, our next briefing will be this afternoon at 4:30 p.m. We'll have another complete update from the National Hurricane Center at 4 o'clock, and we'll follow that by our briefing here at 4:30. Then we'll do another one late tonight at 10:30. That'll follow the 10 p.m. update by the National Hurricane Center at that time. Okay, so what we're going to do now, we're going to go ahead and go through our parish by parish and county by county breakdowns here and discuss what kind of impacts to expect. All of these graphics are going to be posted on our social media pages just as soon as this briefing wraps up. So if you miss it for some reason and you're unable to rewind, which you should be able to do, but if you can't, all of these graphics will be available for your perusal just as soon as we wrap up our briefing here. So we're going to go ahead and jump into it here. I'm going to keep it full screen. I know you missed my beautiful face, but I'm going to go ahead and keep it full screen here so you can have a good look without having to look over my shoulder at what is actually going on. And then once we get through this, I will answer questions that you may still have. So we're going to start with the highest risk areas across the region. We're starting with Vermilion Parish, where we're looking at winds 70 to 80 miles per hour, gusting to 90, storm surge 5 to 10 feet. Rainfall totals 6 to 8 inches with up to 12 inches possible. That's certainly going to be enough to cause some significant flooding concerns. We are looking at a slight risk, which is a roughly 5 to 10% chance of seeing a tornado. And we are expecting some power outages from these strong winds, these hurricane force winds in and around Vermilion Parish. Next up, Lafayette, we're looking at 50 to 60 mile per hour winds gusting to 70, 4 to 6 inches of rainfall with up to 12 inches possible. We are looking at a slight risk of tornadoes, a 5 to 10% chance. We are expecting at least some power outages across Lafayette Parish as well, and the possibility of flash flooding from that heavy rainfall. Iberia is up next, 70 to 80 mile per hour winds gusting to 90, 5 to 10 feet of storm surge along the coastline, 8 to 10 inches of rainfall with up to 16 inches possible. Slight risk of tornadoes in the 5 to 10% chance range, and we are expecting some power outages, if not some widespread power outages across Iberia Parish with those gusts above hurricane force. For St. Martin Parish, 70 to 80 mile per hour winds gusting to 90, storm surge 5 to 10 feet. We're looking at 8 to 10 inches of rainfall with up to 16 inches possible. We're looking at a slight risk, a 5 to 10% chance of seeing a tornado. Wind gusts will lead to some power outages almost certainly across parts of St. Martin Parish as well, if not widespread power outages. And we are going to be looking at the other thing I would mention for all of these so far is that these winds to hurricane force are going to be capable of blowing around or blowing away any light objects that are left outdoors. So make sure, regardless of whether what your plans are, whether you're staying or going or anything along the lines, make sure to bring in any light or loose outdoor objects so they don't blow around and become projectiles in hurricane force winds. St. Mary, 70 to 80 mile per hour winds gusting to 90, 5 to 10 feet of surge outside of the levee protection districts, 8 to 10 inches of storm surge with up to 16 inches possible. We're looking at a 5 to 10% chance of a tornado. That's a slight risk categorical tornado threat. And we are looking at a fair bit of power outages expected across St. Mary. For Evangeline, 30 to 40 mile per hour winds gusting to 50, 4 to 6 inches of rainfall with up to 12 inches possible. A marginal risk of tornadoes, so roughly about 2 to 4%. And we could see a few power outages across Evangeline. They're not going to be as widespread as in and around Vermilion Bay, but we could see a few power outages with some tree branches getting knocked onto power lines with some gusts to 50 miles per hour. For Avoyelles, 40 to 50 mile per hour winds gusting to 60. Rainfall totals 4 to 6 inches with up to 12 inches possible. A marginal risk, a 2 to 4% chance of seeing a tornado. And we could have a few power outages as well from tree branches getting knocked onto power lines. For St. Landry, 40 to 50 mile per hour winds gusting to 60. 4 to 6 inches of rainfall with up to 12 inches possible. A marginal risk, a 2 to 4% chance of seeing a tornado. And we could see some at least a few power outages across St. Landry with those 60 mile per hour wind gusts knocking trees or tree branches, I should say, onto power lines. For Cameron, 40 to 50 mile per hour winds gusting to 60, 1 to 5 feet of storm surge. We're looking at 4 to 8 inches of rainfall with up to 12 inches possible. A marginal risk of tornadoes, which is about a 2 to 4% chance. And we could see some power outages across Cameron Parish because of those 60 mile per hour plus wind gusts. For Calcasieu, 30 to 40 mile per hour winds gusting to 50, 2 to 3 inches of rainfall with up to 6 inches possible. A low end marginal risk, 2 to 4% of seeing tornadoes. And we could see a few power outages across Calcasieu due to branches being knocked onto power lines. For Beauregard, 30 to 40 mile per hour winds gusting to 45. Again, Beauregard is no longer in a tropical storm warning. But we could see a couple of gusts to tropical storm force. Rainfall totals of 2 to 3 inches with up to 6 inches possible. A marginal risk of tornadoes, so a 2 to 4% chance. And we could see a few power outages across Beauregard, but I don't expect them to be too widespread. For Vernon, 15 to 25 mile per hour winds gusting to 30, 1 to 2 inches of rain with up to 4 inches possible. We're not expecting a tornado threat across Vernon. The biggest threat across Vernon Parish is going to be the potential, if we get a few of those tropical downpours, to get some localized street flooding. That's really going to be about it. For Jeff Davis, 30 to 40 mile per hour winds gusting to 50, 4 to 6 inches of rainfall with up to 12 inches possible. A marginal risk of tornadoes, 2 to 4%. We could see a few power outages across Jeff Davis with those gusts to 50 mile per hour. For Allen Parish, 20 to 30 mile per hour winds with gusting to 40, 3 to 4 inches of rainfall with up to 8 inches possible. We are looking at a marginal risk, a 2 to 4% chance of seeing a tornado across Allen Parish. Wind gusts will have the potential to knock some tree branches onto power lines, leading to a few power outages across Allen Parish. For Rapides, 15 to 25 mile per hour winds gusting to 35, 3 to 4 inches of rain with up to 8 inches possible. There is a marginal risk, a 2 to 4% chance of seeing a tornado across Rapides. That's mainly going to be the eastern half of Rapides Parish. And we not expecting power outages across Rapides Parish. Winds aren't going to be strong enough for that. We could see some minor street flooding if we get some of those heavier rain bands setting up across parts of Rapides. For Acadia, did I already do Acadia? Oh, maybe I didn't. 30 to 4 mile per hour winds, gusting to 50, 4 to 6 inches of rainfall with up to 12 inches possible, a 2 to 4% marginal risk, and we could see a few power outages across parts of Acadia Parish, but we're not expecting widespread power outages. For Newton County, 15 to 20 mile per hour winds gusting to 30, about a ½ inch to an inch of rainfall, maybe 2 inches on the high end. That's probably being a bit ambitious. We're not expecting much in the way of rainfall across Newton County, and we are not expecting any significant hazards to speak of across Newton County either. For Jefferson County, most of this is going to be for lower parts of Jefferson County, closer to the coastline. 30 to 40 mile per hour winds gusting to 50, 2 to 4 feet of storm surge, 1 to 2 inches of rainfall with up to 4 inches possible. We're not expecting much in the way of a tornado threat across Jefferson County. We could see some power outages right along the coastline where we get those stronger gusts, but I think they're going to fall off pretty quickly as we get away from the immediate coastline. So I'm not expecting a lot of power outages further inland across parts of Jefferson County. For Orange County, 20 to 30 mile per hour winds gusting to 40, 2 to 4 feet of storm surge around Sabine Lake. Rainfall 1 to 1.5 inches with up to 3 inches possible. We're not expecting a tornado threat across Orange County. The biggest threat for Orange County is going to be the potential for storm surge flooding and maybe some rainfall related flooding if you get it under a couple of those heavier rain bands. For Hardin County, 15 to 20 mile per hour winds gusting to 30, ½ inch to 1 inch of rainfall with up to 2 inches possible. No tornado threat, not expecting any significant hazards. And finally, Tyler County, 15 to 20 mile per hour winds gusting to 30, ½ inch to 1 inch of rainfall with 2 inches possible. We're not expecting any tornado threat and really no significant impacts anticipated across Tyler County. Jasper County, last one. 15 to 20 mile per hour winds, kind of pretty much the same as Tyler, ½ inch to 1 inch with up to 2 inches possible. We're not expecting any significant impacts really across Jasper County with this system. So that's what we have here this morning from the National Weather Service. As always, if you have any questions, feel free to post them in our comment section here, and I'll be happy to answer them over the next little while. These parish by parish breakdowns will be posted on our social media pages just as soon as we wrap up our briefing here, and I can get them out. So if you missed your parish or county, look out for them there. They will be there in all of their fantastic, wonderful glory, and feel free to share them as widely as you deem appropriate. I'm going to go ahead and back up here. Give me just a second. I'm going to see if we do have any questions. If you do have a question, go ahead and throw it in there. Dwayne says, Donald, there appears to be a large mass of convection just northeast of Francine. Is that going to rob moisture and power from Francine? No, I don't think it will. If anything, it's going to probably add some moisture to it. And that's actually associated with, let me see, the satellite's probably the best I got. That's actually probably the rainfall that we're going to start seeing early this afternoon across the region. Whether this is directly or indirectly associated with Francine is still kind of up for a little bit of debate. I think Francine is definitely influencing this development out in front of it here. It may not be directly related to it, but it's not going to necessarily inhibit its development in any significant capacity. If anything, Francine may draw some of that moisture into it, and that may help it a little bit. Jennifer asked about the chances of it shifting west again. We could see a little bit of a shift one way or the other. I don't expect a significant shift. We're getting within about 24 to 30 hours of landfall or thereabout. You can see the cone of uncertainty there ranges roughly from about the Cameron-Vermilion Parish line east to about New Orleans. So a shift within that cone is certainly not out of the realm of possibility. I do not expect a dramatic shift back to the west, as far west as, say, Lake Charles at this point. That does not seem likely. Kate says models have been consistently shifting the storm track eastward. Do you anticipate the track to keep drifting in that direction with the next update? Based on the latest models that I'm seeing, they seem to be kind of coming together a little bit more. I do expect, I mean, there's almost always some slight shift in the track with each successive update. I don't expect anything dramatic, though, either east or west. Liza asks, so with it being 24 hours out, the time for major track shifts has passed. Is that correct? Generally, yes. There have been instances with especially weaker tropical systems where even 24 hours out, we can see some dramatic shifts, but I don't anticipate any real significant shifts from here. A few miles one way or the other, but that's probably gonna be about it. I have so many questions right here about the possibility of it shifting back west. Listen to what I'm saying, everybody, right now. I'm going to answer it one time. Okay, here it is for everybody who's listening right now, because there's a dozen questions here. What is the possibility of it shifting west? What is the possibility? What if it goes west? What about the, yeah? Okay, so yes, again, there is the possibility we could see a slight shift back to the west. I don't think it's particularly likely at this point. It's not going to be a dramatic shift back to the west towards Lake Charles. That is extremely unlikely at this point. We could see a shift back to the west for a landfall, perhaps across western Vermilion Parish. That's about as far west as I would anticipate any shift tracks to the west would go. The likelihood of it shifting back over, say, for a Cameron or Lake Charles landfall at this point is pretty low. I'm not saying it's zero, because I'll never say it's zero. I got burned on that in Hurricane Harvey, but it is very low. Natalie wants to know when she should begin her hurricane party and start my snacks. Well, we're going to be looking at those rain bands coming into the area later on this afternoon into this evening. So I would say that's party time tonight and into tomorrow. Anna asks, if I had a single daughter living in Lake Charles, would I tell her to stay or leave? I would say stay. At this point, there's no significant life-threatening impacts in the Lake Charles area. Edwina says, my son's manager at his job in New Iberia is requiring him to go into work tomorrow for 1 p.m. Would it be safe to do so? You're going to be looking at hurricane force winds moving into that area. Maybe not necessarily at 1 p.m., but as you go through the afternoon, you'll definitely be looking at tropical storm force winds by 1 p.m. And those hurricane force winds will be moving in by mid to late afternoon into the evening. So I certainly wouldn't want to be on the roads during that time frame. So you can take that for what it is. Alexandra says, so there's no need to leave our homes here in Lake Charles? No, there's no need to leave your homes here in Lake Charles. Marietta asks, when should we expect the wind to start? We're going to be looking at the tropical storm force winds beginning sometime tomorrow morning. Right now, we've been saying between about 6 and 10 a.m. Depending on exactly where you are. It's probably going to be a little bit later in the morning for south central Louisiana, so down towards the New Iberia, Morgan City area. We're probably going to be closer to that 10 a.m. time frame. But we're going to be looking at the beginning essentially tomorrow morning. The landfall, if you look at the official forecast track again, is going to be tomorrow afternoon, probably sometime between about 4 and 8 p.m. or thereabouts, probably a little bit earlier than that, probably about 4 and 6 p.m. Based on this current forecast track. And that is when the hurricane force winds are going to be moving in, probably between about 2 and 6 p.m. across south central Louisiana. Ashlyn asks, is Lafayette in the clear now? No. Have you not been listening to me, Ashlyn? Lafayette is going to be looking at very strong tropical storm force winds, if not some gusts to hurricane force. So no, there will be some significant impacts across Lafayette. Sarah asks, would you advise your college kids in NOLA to evacuate? Well, first off, I don't cover NOLA, so I can't talk too specifically about that. I don't think there are any evacuation orders in effect for New Orleans that I'm aware of. So unless those orders are issued, my advice would be hunker down and just ride it out. Brandon asks, once it makes landfall on the coast, what can you expect for duration? As far as tropical storm force winds go, I mean, it's going to be largely dependent, obviously, on exactly where you are. The longest duration is going to be South Central Louisiana, in and around the area that it's making landfall. So the Morgan City area, New Iberia area, you're going to be looking at the longest duration of tropical storm force winds beginning tomorrow morning. So roughly about, we'll say, between 8 and 10 a.m., and then continuing through probably tomorrow night. So you're going to be looking at roughly about a 12 to 16 hour period of tropical storm force winds. The hurricane force winds are going to be a much shorter duration event. We're looking at roughly about 20 to 40 mile wide hurricane force wind swath. So that's not going to last more than probably a couple of hours for the highest overall winds. Jamie asks, does it still look like it'll come through Vermilion Bay? Yes, the official forecast has a landfall point right now right near Morgan City, so that would take it most directly through Vermilion Bay. Let's see. Ruth is asking about the timing of tropical storm and hurricane force winds in Lafayette. We kind of just discussed that. We're generally going to be looking at the onset of tropical storm force winds for the Lafayette area, probably between 8 and 10 a.m. Hurricane force winds, if you're going to experience them, they're going to be kind of early evening time frame, probably between about 5 and 8 p.m. If I had to put a number on it or a time frame on it right now, that's when you'd be most likely to experience hurricane force winds in Lafayette. That's not a foregone conclusion. You may see some gusts to hurricane force. I don't expect that you're going to see sustained winds of hurricane force in Lafayette, unless the storm is stronger than we're forecasting it to be. Angela asks, when is it expected to turn? Does timing of the turn affect landfall? It's already turned. So the turn is already done. It's moving to the northeast now, and that is expected to continue. There's not going to be a whole lot of change in terms of motion going forward, other than it's going to increase in forward speed. So the turn is done. It's already happened. So we don't expect any significant changes in forecast track with regards to that. Sam Spence asks, do we need to bring the pets inside? I think that's probably a good idea anywhere across Southwest Louisiana or South Central Louisiana, certainly anywhere we're going to experience strong tropical storm force winds. But even areas that are only going to experience, 30 or 40 mile an hour winds, like we had just discussed, animals get spooked easily. So it's not a bad idea to offer them some shelter, at least going into tomorrow when the most significant impacts are going to be. Samantha says, my sound keeps going off. Can I watch it later? Yes, this will be available as a recording just as soon as our briefing ends here. It'll be recorded on Facebook. I think it's recorded on X. It's recorded on YouTube. So you can watch it then. Not that you necessarily want to listen to my whiny voice for that long. Might be a good thing that your sound's going out. Alex asked if power outages and debris is a definite outcome from Lake Charles. No, not necessarily. I think there is the possibility of a few power outages across Lake Charles. You know, we are going to be looking at some gusty winds, maybe 30, 40 miles an hour. If a tree branch gets knocked onto a power line, that can certainly cause some power outages. But I'm not expecting a lot in the way of power outages. As far as debris, if there's any light or loose objects out in yards, those will be subject to getting blown around, maybe a trash can. That's probably going to be the limit of debris. I don't expect any debris from homes or trees, other than maybe some very small tree branches. Not in the Lake Charles area anyway. Now, points further east, Vermilion Parish, in and around Vermilion Bay, Lafayette, certainly east towards the Baton Rouge area, and points further east than there, you're going to be looking at much stronger winds, so the chance for debris is going to be much higher. Brandy asked, should we board windows near New Iberia? That's probably going to be a good idea. Again, just like we were talking about with debris, you're going to be looking at hurricane force winds in and around the New Iberia area. So boarding up windows, probably a pretty good idea to stop that debris from potentially breaking your windows. Mary asked, when is the hurricane plane flying out again for an update? According to the Hurricane Center, they're sending planes out every 3 hours right now. So there should be one. There was one in there this morning. There should be another one in there momentarily, if not already. Jim asked, should I put my potato salad in my gumbo? Jim, that is completely up to you. I have no opinion on that whatsoever because I'm not eating your gumbo. So you do you, my friend Jim. Personally, I don't, but that's just me. I know I'm going to get some hate mail now for that. Watch. Kimberly asks, is it safe to say Lake Charles will just get some thunderstorms, approximate time that Lake Charles will be in the clear? Yeah, generally speaking. I mean, it's going to be windy, but you know, we're not going to be looking at hurricane force winds by any means. So when are we going to be in the clear? You're going to be, I mean, all of this should be out of the, I mean, it's going to remain breezy probably through Thursday just because of the proximity of the low pressure area. But the majority of the rainfall should be out of here by Wednesday night. Tiffany's with me. She says potato salad does not belong in gumbo. We're going to start a gumbo war in here. I can feel it. See, Rebecca says definitely put potato salad in the gumbo. Okay, this is getting way off track here. Ashley asks, is it safe to stay in a mobile home in Lake Charles? At this point, yes. I don't expect there to be a problem for mobile homes in Lake Charles. All right, so getting a lot of questions here about individual locations again. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and wrap up this briefing here, and I'm going to get those parish by parish slides. I'm going to send those out. They are going to be available on our Facebook page. They'll be available on our X account page, whatever you want to call it. I'll try to get them on our Instagram page as well. So they will be available, readily available. Feel free to share them widely. So everybody can see them, and then nobody should have any questions anymore because they'll know what to expect for their particular area. Our next briefing is going to be 4:30 p.m. this afternoon. We'll have another complete update from the National Hurricane Center at 4 o'clock, and then we'll be back on here a half hour later to follow that up with a 4:30 briefing, and then we're going to have another briefing tonight at 10:30 p.m. That will follow the next complete update from the Hurricane Center at 10 p.m. as well. if the forecast track changes significantly or the impacts change significantly, we will have revised parish-by-parish breakdowns, and those will be sent out as well at that time. In the meantime, everyone stay safe today. The rain is going to start this afternoon, so just be ready for that, because we are going to be looking at some rain moving into the area. And then conditions decrease or begin to diminish, get worse, tomorrow morning by around 8 a.m. That's when you want to have all of your preparations and plans complete, because conditions will be deteriorating thereafter through the day. In the meantime, everyone have a wonderful rest of your morning and early afternoon. We'll talk to you again 4:30 this afternoon.